Hello, this is Sarah Braasch. Welcome back to my channel. So I want to do a video about the anti-cancel culture letter that was published in Harper's with about 150 signatories, mostly very powerful, very wealthy, very successful people. But what I want to talk about specifically is the response to the anti-cancel culture letter. And I specifically want to talk about the response of Joy Reid of MSNBC and NBC News, of the Comcast Corporation, and also specifically Charles Blow, the New York Times columnist, opinion writer. And I really want to discuss specifically their responses on Twitter. And it wasn't just them, it was a lot of people. This was the response of a lot of persons to the anti-cancel culture letter. And I'm going to make a different video where I talk about my response to the letter itself. But right now I just want to talk about how Joy Reid responded and how Charles Blow of the New York Times responded. And both of them basically scoffed at the letter and said cancel culture doesn't exist. Cancel culture doesn't exist. Cancel culture does not exist. And both of them, well, basically, Joy Reid just pointed to what Charles Blow had posted on Twitter and said this. But Charles Blow was very specific in his Twitter response to this anti-cancel culture letter that was published in Harper's. And he said matter-of-factly, vehemently, that cancel culture does not exist, and that this is just entitled people, super successful, wealthy, powerful people who have major platforms, and they are just basically whining because they are being held to account for the bigoted, racist, sexist, etc. things that they've said and done, and that they're being held to account by the masses of nobodies, basically in concerted collective action, especially on social media. And that this is something that the oppressed nobodies have never been able to do before. And so, this is just a bunch of super wealthy, successful, privileged, elite people whining about being held to account for their bigotry and racism and sexism and oppression, etc., by the poor, powerless, penniless nobodies just being able to work together in collective concerted action, especially on social media, to bring these super powerful, privileged people to account. And so cancel culture doesn't really exist, does not exist. And this was explicitly what Charles Blow said on Twitter in response to this Harper's anti-cancel culture letter. And so what I want to say is that I actually had a pretty hard day yesterday. Because having to watch, and Joy Reid and Charles Blow were by far not the only people who had this response to the Harper's letter. There are many, many persons who had this response to the Harper's letter and who were very happy to express this attitude on Twitter. And themselves very powerful, privileged, elite, successful, wealthy people, powerful people, public figures with blue check marks and huge Twitter followings. So for me, it's really ineffable, the level of rage, despair, frustration, exasperation, consternation that I feel reading this crap. Because I'm not powerful, I'm not wealthy, I'm not rich. In many respects, from many perspectives, I'm not successful. I'm basically powerless, penniless. At the time that the Living or Napping While Black hate crime hoax at Yale happened, I had nothing. I was dealing with my PTSD, my mental health disabilities. I was basically living like a hermit, like Rapunzel, like a recluse at the top of a tower on Yale's campus. And the only thing I wanted in the whole world was to be left alone and in peace to finish my Saving the World project, to finish my PhD dissertation. So I was dragged into the public spotlight against my will. I didn't even know that I had been recorded. I didn't even realize what had happened to me, that a bomb had been thrown into the middle of my life, until, almost 24 hours after the event actually occurred in the early morning hours of May 8th, 2018. I was standing in my own doorway when I was recorded, so it was a gross violation of my privacy. It was done without my consent or knowledge. And so I was the concerted, collective action against me that took place. Yes, of course, there were the hordes of, nobodies and anonymous trolls on social media, including Twitter and Facebook, etc. But it wasn't just a bunch of nobodies, unless people consider Shonda Rhimes, Roxane Gay, Ijeoma Oluo, who was tweeting to her 200,000 Twitter followers at the time to stalk and harass me in my own home, so I had to flee my dorm room right away. And Trevor Noah, Whoopi Goldberg, the Women of The View, Trevor Noah, The Daily Show on Comedy Central, Soledad O'Brien, who else? I mean, the list just goes on and on. Recently, Josie Duffy Rice, the president of the appeal, incited a Twitter mob against me with the New York State Attorney Rebecca Kavanaugh, who's been obsessed, has had a sick and terrifying obsession with me for the past over 2 years. Patricia Arquette, Hollywood, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Rosanna Arquette, Joyce Carol Oates, the writer, tweeted to her Twitter following that I'm a slavery apologist. Just the list. The list just goes on and on and on and on. Blue checkmark public figures with millions of Twitter followers, moguls, entertainment industry moguls, academia moguls, publishing moguls, just everybody, this, basically every single rich, powerful, successful, wealthy organization or person in the US and around the world participated in the global vilification and defamation campaign against me, which almost got me killed, sent me into hiding, destroyed my lifelong human and civil rights, academic, and legal careers. So, the New York Times helped lead this global vilification and defamation campaign against me. The New York Times continues to defame me to this day, even though they know I'm entirely innocent. They continue to try to drive me to suicide at the behest of the Yale administration to this day. Also, Joy Reid, to this day, continues to defame me on NBC News and MSNBC News. To this day, Joy Reid continues to defame me and try to drive me to suicide for moral outrage industry profit and gain at the cost of the Living While Black movement, because it's an easier way to make a cheap buck than actually addressing real racism and police brutality. So she doesn't actually care about Black people. She doesn't actually care about racism. She doesn't actually care about police brutality. She cares about money. She cares about money. And she doesn't care if she gets an innocent human rights activist killed to get it. So anyway, you can imagine how it makes me feel to see people, in particular like Joy Reid and Charles Blow, say that cancel culture doesn't exist. It's the ultimate in gaslighting. It's the ultimate in gaslighting, which is a favorite term of the woke intersectional feminists. But it's the ultimate in gaslighting. What about my lived experience of being canceled, of being in hiding for more than 2 years, of being deluged with death threats and threats of violence, of almost committing suicide countless times, of having my academic and legal careers completely decimated. I'm unemployable now. I'll never be able to support myself. My reputation has been destroyed. My good name has been destroyed, which was all I had. So instead of this super powerful, rich, wealthy, successful person being held accountable for their bigotry by the powerless masses of powerless, penniless people in concert, in collective action. For me, I'm actually the antithesis of a public figure, was a hermit, no Twitter following. And you would think that these public figures with blue check marks and huge Twitter followings, an entertainment industry mogul like Shonda Rhimes, would think, oh, wait a minute, this is a nobody. This is a private nobody, a private citizen nobody. She has no social media presence, basically, no Twitter followers. And she has the only thing that you can find on her when you Google her name, which is not at all common. So it's easy to Google her name and find out information on her. Oh, look, she's a lifelong human and civil rights activist, an anti-racism activist. So maybe I shouldn't tweet out what amounts to a death threat against this private citizen nobody, since I'm Shonda Rhimes and I have 2 million Twitter followers and I'm an entertainment industry mogul of epic proportions and a public figure with a verified account and a blue check mark. And that was one of the things that Josie Duffy Rice made crack jokes about when she was inciting the Twitter mobbing against me that almost drove me to suicide recently, was that my life was worthless because I don't have a verified Twitter account and a blue check mark. So that was nice. So you can imagine how it makes me feel to see people say that cancel culture doesn't exist, especially Joy Reid and Charles Blow of the New York Times. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I think I'll stop there, but if you can, please donate to my legal fund. I'll have my PayPal me and GoFundMe links below so that I can start suing some of these evil people. Thank you. I love you all so much. Take care. Bye.